Daniel Carter never imagined that staying quiet could cost him everything, until the day he saw an orange sign on his land announcing it had been sold for $1. Linda Hawthorne, the powerful HOA president, smiled confidently as she handed that land to her own son, completely unaware that the man standing in front of her was a true owner. What followed wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. It was a fight between silence and corruption, grief and courage, power and truth. This is a story of how one overlooked man stood up to an entire system and won. If you believe ordinary people can stand up to abuse of power, like this video. If you've ever faced injustice in your own community, share this story so others know they're not alone. And if you want more real, emotional stories where truth finally wins, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the next story might hit even closer to home. My name is Daniel Carter, and for most of my life, I learned how to stay quiet without disappearing. After my wife passed away, silence became a kind of shelter for me. I still lived in the same neighborhood, drove the same car, waved politely at the same people, but I stopped being noticed. And honestly, I was fine with that. Quiet felt safer than grief. At the far end of the neighborhood sat a piece of land everyone referred to as the vacant lot. It was surrounded by uneven grass, stubborn weeds, and a broken wooden fence that leaned like it was tired of standing. Trash sometimes blew into it during storms. Kids whispered stories about it being haunted. Neighbors complained about it lowering property values. The HOA sent warning letters addressed to owner unknown. What no one realized was that the owner was right there the whole time. I bought that lot years earlier, before everything fell apart. My wife and I stood on that land together one warm afternoon, holding hands, imagining what it could become. She wanted a small garden, nothing fancy, just a few benches, flowers, and a place where people could slow down. She believed land remembered kindness. I believed her. When she got sick, those plans were put on hold. When she died, I couldn't bring myself to return. Walking onto that lot felt like reopening a wound that never really healed. So I made a decision that seemed harmless at the time. I paid the property taxes every year, kept the deed secured, and let the land sit untouched. I told myself I'd go back when I was ready. Years passed. The lot became forgotten by everyone except the HOA. That's when Linda Hawthorne entered the picture. Linda was the HOA president, and everyone knew it. She had a loud confidence and a way of talking that made rules sound personal. Her yard was always perfect, her smile always practiced. She walked the neighborhood like she was inspecting her kingdom. People nodded when she passed, not out of respect, but out of caution. One afternoon, while checking my mailbox, I overheard her talking nearby. She was standing with another board member, clipboard tucked under her arm. "That lot is an eyesore," she said sharply. "No owner has come forward in years." The other woman hesitated. What if someone does own it? Linda waved her hand dismissively. Then they should have cared enough to show it. Something about that sentence made my chest tighten. A few days later, I noticed the HOA notices changed. No longer owner unknown. Now they read abandoned property. Fines were listed. Warnings posted. Deadline set. It was happening quietly, efficiently, like a process designed not to be questioned. I told myself I should step in. I told myself I'd do it tomorrow. Then tomorrow became too late. One morning, an orange sign appeared on the lot, bright against the dull grass. I stopped walking when I saw it. My hands shook as I read the words. Property sold. Private development coming soon. The air felt heavy. My heart pounded like it was trying to warn me of something I already knew. Someone had made a move. Someone had decided my silence meant surrender. That was the moment I realized staying quiet had cost me more than I ever imagined. And the worst part was this wasn't just about land anymore. It felt like someone had taken a piece of my past, stamped over it, and claimed it as their own, without ever knowing who was standing right in front of them. I stood there for a long time after reading the sign, like if I didn't move, maybe it would disappear on its own. Cars passed. People walked their dogs. Life went on as if nothing had just shifted under my feet. My name wasn't on that sign, but everything it claimed belonged to me. I felt foolish for waiting, angry at myself for believing silence could protect something that mattered. By the time I reached the HOA office, my hands were steady, but my thoughts were not. The building sat in the center of the neighborhood, neat and polished, just like Linda liked it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. Linda Hawthorne was behind the desk, tapping on her keyboard, glasses low on her nose. She didn't look surprised to see me, and that alone unsettled me. "I have a question about the lot at the end of Willow Drive," I said. She smiled without warmth. "Ah, yes, the abandoned one." "It isn't abandoned," I replied. She leaned back in her chair. "According to our records, it is no activity, no maintenance, no response to notices." "I never receive any notices," I said. She shrugged. "Then perhaps your information wasn't updated." I took a breath. "That land was sold. I want to know how." She folded her hands together, almost enjoying herself. "The HOA reclaimed it under our bylaws. After repeated neglect, the board approved a transfer." "To who?" I asked, though something in me already suspected the answer. "My son," she said calmly. "He plans to clean it up, build something useful." "For $1, I added, recalling the rumor already spreading through the neighborhood. She nodded. "A symbolic amount. Perfectly legal." The word legal echoed in my head. I looked around the office, at the framed certificates, the rule posters on the wall, the authority she carried so comfortably. "That land belongs to someone." I said again, quieter this time. She tilted her head. If that were true, they would have come forward. I met her eyes. "I am coming forward." For a brief second, something flickered across her face. Surprise. Then it vanished, replaced by that same controlled smile. "Do you have proof?" she asked. I did. The deed sat in a folder at home, the edges worn from years of being held and put away again. I had tax receipts, records, everything I needed, but I didn't pull any of it out. "Not with me," I said. Her smile widened just a bit. "Then there's nothing more to discuss." I walked out feeling smaller than when I'd entered. Outside, the sun felt too bright, like it was exposing something I wasn't ready to face. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel, replaying the conversation over and over. She hadn't panicked. She hadn't threatened. She dismissed me like I was a nuisance, not an owner. Over the next few days, the neighborhood changed. Trucks appeared. Surveyors walked the land. Wooden stakes were driven into the soil. Each hammer strike felt personal. I watched from a distance, torn between stepping forward and freezing in place. Neighbors whispered. Some nodded sympathetically. Others avoided eye contact. One evening, I overheard someone say, "About time someone did something with that lot." I wanted to scream that someone had. At home, I opened the folder for the first time in years. The deed was still there, my name clear and undeniable. I ran my fingers over the paper, feeling both relief and regret. Relief that the truth existed. Regret that I had waited so long to speak it aloud. That night, I realized Linda wasn't counting on ignorance. She was counting on hesitation, on fear, on people like me believing it was already too late. And that was when I understood something important. If I didn't act now, this wouldn't just be the loss of land. It would be the moment I prove her right. The sound of machinery became my unwanted alarm clock. Every morning, I woke up to engines rumbling and metal clanking against metal, like the ground itself was being forced awake. I stood at my window with a mug of coffee I never finished, watching strangers walk across land that held memories only I could see. Orange vests, hard hats, clipboards. None of them knew what they were stepping on, and none of them asked. The first tree came down on a Tuesday. It was old. Its branches stretched wide like open arms. I remember my wife standing beneath it once, laughing as leaves fell into her hair. When the chainsaw started, I turned away, but the sound followed me into the house. When it finally stopped, something inside me went quiet in a way that scared me. Neighbors began to talk more openly after that. Some gathered at the edge of their driveways, watching the progress like it was entertainment. Others whispered concerns when they thought no one else could hear. I caught fragmented conversations while walking past, Questions about permits, about speed, about why the sale happened so fast. Still, no one challenged it directly. The HOA had spoken, and that usually ended things. I started taking long walks at night, stopping at the fence line, gripping the wood like it might ground me. I imagined stepping onto the lot, shouting for them to stop, holding up the deed like a shield. But fear kept my feet planted. Fear of being dismissed again. Fear of being too late. Fear that grief had made me weak. Then Mrs. Alvarez knocked on my door. She was in her 70s, kind eyes behind thick glasses, the kind of neighbor who remembered birthdays and baked too much bread. She stood there wringing her hands, glancing over her shoulder like she was afraid of being seen. "Daniel," she said softly, "something isn't right." I invited her in, and she told me what she'd heard. Notices never posted. Votes rushed through. Linda using her title like a hammer. Mrs. Alvarez lowered her voice and said, "That land doesn't feel abandoned. It feels taken." Those words cracked something open in me. After she left, I sat alone at the kitchen table and stared at the folder again. This time, I didn't close it. I spread the papers out, letting the truth take up space. I realized how many people had trusted Linda without question. How many times I had trusted silence. The next morning, I called a lawyer. His office was small and cluttered, books stacked everywhere. He listened without interrupting, his expression tightening as I explained everything. When I finally slid the deed across the desk, he picked it up carefully, like it mattered. "This is yours," he said. "No question." "What about the sale?" I asked. He shook his head. "Illegal. Full stop." The word hit me harder than I expected. Illegal meant there was still time. Illegal meant the ground hadn't been lost, only occupied. For the first time since this began, I felt my shoulders loosen. But the work wasn't over. The lawyer warned me it wouldn't be easy. The HOA would resist. Linda would deny everything. There would be meetings, documents, tension. As I left his office, my phone buzzed. A message from a neighbor I barely knew. "Are you okay? This doesn't seem right." I realized something had shifted. People were paying attention now. Quietly at first, but they were watching. That evening, I stood at the edge of the lot again. The air smelled of cut wood and diesel. I closed my eyes and imagined the garden my wife wanted. The benches, the flowers, the people. This time, I didn't look away. I stayed. And for the first time, I knew I wasn't standing there alone anymore. The notice of the HOA meeting came out on a Friday afternoon, slid into mailboxes like it was just another routine update. Date, time, location. Nothing about the storm it was about to bring. By then, word had spread faster than Linda probably expected. People had questions, and for once, they weren't whispering them in driveways. The meeting room filled quickly. Folding chairs scraped against the floor as neighbors squeezed in, some standing along the walls. I sat near the back, the folder on my lap heavier than paper should feel. Linda stood at the front, composed as always, her voice steady as she welcomed everyone and thanked them for their continued trust. Hearing that phrase made my jaw tighten. She launched into a presentation about progress and property values. Slides showed clean designs and polished renderings of what her son planned to build. She spoke confidently, as if the past didn't exist and the future was already decided. A few people nodded. Others crossed their arms. When she finished, she smiled and asked if there were any questions. That's when my lawyer stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply introduced himself and stated that he represented the legal owner of the lot in question. The room went still. You could hear someone shift in their seat. Linda's smile faltered, just slightly, like a crack in glass. My lawyer asked for the screen. Documents appeared, one by one. The deed, the tax records, years of proof. My name, clear and undeniable, centered on every page. A murmur rolled through the room. Linda stepped forward, trying to regain control. She claimed clerical errors, miscommunication. She insisted the board acted in good faith, but each explanation sounded thinner than the last. When asked about notices and votes, she avoided eye contact. When pressed about the $1 sale, her voice tightened. Then I stood. My legs shook, but I stayed upright. I told them about my wife, about the garden we planned, about staying silent because grief made me retreat instead of fight. I admitted my mistake in waiting, and I owned it fully. Faces softened. A few people wiped their eyes. This wasn't abandoned, I said. It was protected, just quietly. Questions turned into statements. Neighbors spoke up about feeling bullied, about fines that made no sense, about being afraid to challenge the HOA. Each voice added weight to the truth Linda could no longer carry alone. A board member finally asked for a recess. When they returned, the decision came quickly. Linda was removed as HOA president, effective immediately. An independent review would follow. The sale was declared void. The room exhaled as one. Linda didn't speak. She gathered her papers with stiff movements and walked out without looking back. No applause followed her, just silence. After the meeting, people approached me. Some apologized for not asking questions sooner. Others thanked me for standing up. Mrs. Alvarez hugged me tightly and whispered, "You did the right thing." Outside, the night air felt different, lighter. The construction equipment sat quiet in the distance, paused for the first time since it began. For years, I believed standing alone was safer than risking disappointment. That night showed me something else. When truth finally speaks, it doesn't just reclaim what was taken. It invites others to stand with it. The morning after the meeting, I walked to the lot without hesitation. For the first time in years, my feet didn't slow as I reached the broken fence. The construction equipment was gone, hauled away in the quiet hours of the night, like it had never belonged there. The ground was scarred, trees missing, earth uneven, but it was mine again. More than that, it felt respected again. I stepped inside and stood still, letting the breeze move through the tall grass that remained. The place felt different now, not because it had changed, but because I wasn't looking at it through grief anymore. I was looking at it through responsibility. By mid-morning, neighbors began to arrive. Not in a crowd, not announced, just one by one. Mrs. Alvarez came first, holding gardening gloves and a small shovel. Then a couple from down the street brought trash bags. A father showed up with his teenage son. No one asked for permission. No one needed instructions. They just started helping. We cleared debris together, working in quiet understanding. Old boards were stacked. Trash was collected. Someone fixed the fence enough to stand straight again. Every small act felt like an apology being gently offered and accepted at the same time. During a break, I told them about my wife, about how she dreamed of a garden that didn't belong to anyone, but was cared for by everyone. I admitted that losing her made me hide, and that hiding gave someone else a chance to abuse power. No one judged me for it. Instead, they listened. Within weeks, the lot transformed. Flower beds appeared. A simple bench was built. Kids stopped calling it scary and started calling it the garden place. Laughter replaced the noise of machines. What was once a point of tension became a meeting point. Linda moved away quietly. Her son sold the plans he never got to use. There were investigations and consequences, but they stayed out of the spotlight. What mattered more was what stayed behind. The HOA changed. Meetings became open conversations instead of warnings. People asked questions without fear. Rules were rewritten with transparency. Trust, once broken, started to rebuild slowly, the only way it ever can. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat on the bench and watched neighbors talk. Kids run, hands dirty from planting. I imagined my wife there beside me, smiling like she always did when things finally made sense. I realized something then. Justice didn't arrive with anger or revenge. It came quietly, through truth, through community, through the courage to speak when staying silent feels easier. The lot was never just land. It was a test of integrity, of patience, of whether people would look away or stand together. In the end, perseverance mattered more than power. Unity mattered more than authority. And hope mattered more than fear. Sometimes, losing your voice teaches you exactly how important it is to use it. And sometimes, standing up for what's yours creates something far bigger than what was ever taken.